that's also part of the reason I made the damn film. Like I was like, I spent 17 years dealing with, you know, these temperamental artists and help guiding them into careers. And then they would just walk away and said, I'll make a film focused on me. And part of the other reason making Man in Camo is that, you know, every time I would show the other films that were all about the collective of artists, all the other filmmakers and much bigger filmmakers than me would say, you need to be a bigger focus of this film. You're the voice of this group. And I was resistant because it's a collective. So I didn't want my voice to be overshadowing any of the other artists. I wanted everybody to get the same light. So I separated and said, I'll do that.
You interviewed a lot of your artists on the film as well, though, no? And
in any other subtext, you'd think that he was a juvenile delinquent, but because he's from New York, he's an artist.
You told me you had just attacked somebody with a machete.
And he told me that he's never going to stop creating, no matter what.
His entire life, from when he wakes up in the morning, from the very first moment he opens his eyes till the moment he closes his eyes, he's thinking about ways he can challenge himself and his cohorts into being creative.
I mean, I can't imagine making a film that wasn't anti-establishment. I mean, have you seen it? He's not part of the establishment.
I just knew that he wrote, and I knew that he was dyslexic, but I hadn't really considered what the two of those things meant until after I started editing his raw work.
Diagnosed at a very young age, and it's core to who you are.
30 years ago, Ethan started a zine that became an art movement.
It's known that the art world now is just a place that's about money and moving and shaking. It's not really about discovering artists or any of that anymore. So as artists, we have to carry on in our own sort of collective way, because I think we're some of the last that are left in the Alamo.
Oh God, it's so narcissistic. Who would make a film about themselves?
I mean, they're very comical, you know. I mean, to comment on Ethan Minsker and all that, but I mean, I found it great. I mean, and I mean, especially what I wanted to ask you about the film, besides the interviews with your mother, the interviews with your father, are they previous, like from before? Is that kind of why you kind of edited him in the way that you edited him?
No, so my father has Parkinson's disease. So even if I interviewed him face to face, it would be very difficult, like especially now, for you to hear and understand what he's saying. And secondly, it's like, you know, I tried so many times when he was in New York or going out there to interview him, and he just would not, you know, he was nervous about it and whatever. And I talk with him every week on Skype. So I just said, hey, can I shoot us talking now? And he was okay with it. And, you know, I was amazed at the stuff, like, again, the comments I got from the filmmakers were like, you got to really drill in onto this. So my interviews with my dad are him admitting to being a workaholic and like basically neglecting me and my sister. And it was amazing that he admitted that on camera. I was like, so it was a really kind of breakthrough thing for me. And I think it helps in the film. But again, I subtitle him in the film because I think it's hard to understand what he's saying. And yeah. And definitely now, that's like, you know, that was like 6 or 7 years ago, and the Parkinson's always progresses, so it'd be even harder to do it now. But he wants to watch the film. I don't know if, I still don't know if he's watched it. I don't want him to really watch the film at all.
You should watch your film, of course.
Yeah. He should not. My mom has watched it. My daughter has watched it at the film festivals. And I specifically said my daughter should not come in to see my film until this minute, where it's like we're talking about her. And my mother brought my daughter into the film, her grandmother, in the part where it's all the sex stuff. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, don't show my, you know, ex-lovers and sex stuff to my daughter. And then of course my daughter's like, you had other girlfriends? And I'm like, oh God. She's like, you say a lot of bad words. And I'm like, but she loved the film festivals.
I think your dad would be very proud of you if he saw the film. That's the most important thing.
Well, he's read the books, and he's much more of, you know, analytical, logical So for him, like in the text version of the books, that's like he's very proud of those stories, though it's very hard to read. You know, like again, the books are almost like another chapter of Man in Camo, but it's like broken up in Washington, D.C. and growing up through violence and dyslexia and having friends murdered in the punk rock scene and surviving that.
I read the Rich Boy Cries for Mama, but it must be so hard for you to put, with dyslexia, put those things on paper, write it down. I have a process.
So like what I do is I write stuff on paper, and then I will dictate it into my phone. Then I will take that text and email it to me in Google, and then I will play it back and Google will read it back to me. And then I put it into a Word doc, and then I do the spell checking through that. And then I send it to one of my editors. They give me all the notes back. Then I had somebody like you who did this before. You read back early versions of the book of one of those books to me so I could hear it in a voice. But with the text reader in Google, it's a monotone voice. So I'm terrible at grammatical stuff. So the editors kind of change the way my voice is through the grammatical thing. And then I hear it back from somebody reading it. So then it fits. So it's all my writing. It's all my thoughts, but I have a group of 2 editors that work on all the zines and all the books. And then I also send the books out as a text form for readers to give feedback on. So I get, not only do I go through a book like 1,000 times, but I have probably about 40 different people who read the books and give me notes. And the same thing with the films. I send the films as links, get feedback to that.
Do you think we should be doing that with our show and podcast?
It's a good process.
It's an amazing process. It's an
amazing process. It also makes
process
people invested in what you're doing.
Because I like to get feedback.
But you were sure about your voice. You sure about your voice.
Like I'm going to have my story the way it is. But getting the critical feedback, like I love critical feedback during the process, not when something's done. Because once something's done and it's out the world, I can't change it. But in the process of making it, and a big thing in the antagonist movement was we had a whole manifesto. And in the manifesto, one of those things was it's about the process and not the product. So enjoy it while you're working through it. And that's the biggest part of it. But once it's done, it's dead to you and it's out in the world. So it's almost like the artist kills its artwork. So the art itself is birthed by you, has a useful life and an untimely death. And for me, the untimely death, sorry, I hit the microphone. The untimely death is the moment I can no longer change it and it's out in the world.
But would you compare that almost to like street art and graffiti? Like it's there for a certain amount of time and then someone manipulates it or destroys it or,
Yeah, I mean, like I do street art. And so like, I'll say this, I've shown this, that a lot of my personal artwork is in paper mache, support your post office.
Yes. Yeah, I like that you have these.
Yeah.
Two.
So
maybe I'll buy these off you. We can keep them on the side over here.
Why when did you make this?
So why the wolf? Is that our friend 45 or?
So the pigeon, I did these mini zines. And one of them was
the pigeon one. Yeah.
So that is the bear. So this was like animals of New York. So each thing was like you pick an animal and you fit into whichever one sort of justifies your New York personality. And then the other one was pigeons of New York, because pigeons, even though they're kind of like flying rats, it's kind of like if New York City had an animal like that, it represented the city, it's definitely the pigeon.
Right.
But to finish on the street art thing, so I do a lot of paper mache street art, right? So I would do these, take a process, make multiples, put them out in the city. And I used to do that with guns. I would make paper mache guns and these badges of shame for police brutality. And you put it out, and the moment, like you document it, you photograph it, you videotape it, you walk away from it. Again, it's dead, it's done.
Was that kind of, because I saw like in the film, so you worked with Richard Hamilton. I mean, I really would like you to elaborate on that, because what an amazing artist. I just watched his documentary, and I used to see his work around. Man. Yeah, in the late 80s, early 90s. Then, he kind of disappeared. he kind of had a very troubled life, right, with drugs and alcohol.
Right.
And,
so Richard Hamilton is considered one of the horsemen of the apocalypse of street art. So there's like Basquiat, there's Keith Haring, Richard Hamilton. There's another that I can't recall, but he did these like shadow man kind of like portraits thing of like shadows basically. And I remember when I moved to the Lower East Side, I would see these and be like, what the hell?
Right.
Like, they would scare. I'd be like, forget it was there. And I'm like, oh, it's one of his things. He was introduced to us by Arturo Vega, who is one of the largest collectors, has one of the largest collections, private collections of Richard Hamilton's, meaning that from his very first art show where he took silhouettes, where he took portraits of himself, and then on the back of these things of Richard Hamilton, he painted black. So people really focused on the backside as opposed to the picture of him. And Arturo started collecting then, from the very first show all the way through up from vinyl, all the way through his blood painting series where he would, as a heroin addict, he would take the blood and spray it on metal and it would oxidize. Right. So when I would go to Arturo's house, we'd always have all this Richard Hamilton collections of stuff. And when we started doing the antagonist shows, Richard Hamilton would come sometimes and do original artwork for us in the spaces like that we did at the old Tower Records space for the Never Say Goodbye show, which we told the people, we're like, don't just rip this out of the wall. They just painted over it. Yeah. We're like, that's probably $500,000 worth of paint.
Right.
But yeah, the guys who ran the bars that we worked with, they would, give him a budget of like, this is how much food you can get on a tab, and Richard would give him paintings, and another one of our guys like gave him his basement space. So Richard Hamilton was literally in there doing artwork in James's basement, shooting heroin, shitting in the basement with his heroin girlfriend, and like the building freaked out, kicked him out. So we have a long history with Richard Hamilton.
I think he just passed, right, in the last year?
A couple years ago. But most important thing, and I'm killing myself because it was like, we did the very first Richard Hamilton show in the basement of Niagara. He hadn't publicly shown in like 20 or 30 years. And we gave him his first, show in our antagonist style because Arturo curated the show. So Arturo brought in his work. Richard, of course, wasn't there because he's a very, at this point, he had already lost his nose through cancer and was not showing up anything publicly. But we put on the show, sold a bunch of his stuff, and then that's when the big fashion guy
that's in the documentary. If you see the documentary,
so that's when his thing started picking up. But we were still involved with him all the way up through his death. So, but it's again like we're an art group that is gallery to street, and we had a lot of people that we worked with. So he didn't advise anyone in our group because he was, shy and out of his mind. But we provided a lot of assistance and support for him. But so New York City, let's get to your questions.
Sure. New York City is...
I want to say, so with the street art thing, it's like you put street art out, you assume it's going to get destroyed. I personally always had a thing, if my artwork stayed on the street for 24 hours, it was a success because people would always take my work off and put it in their damn house.
Right.
And so I even did this badge of shame next to a gallery. The gallery was watching, and then a week later, this couple came by, took it, and I was like, oh, they're like, yeah, it was a really nice gay couple, they seemed. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. So I would always put artwork out on the street as paper mache street art, knowing that somebody would steal it. And then again, I would end up in somebody's private collection. And then years later, like Kurt Hope, who's an amazing painter, somebody's at his house, like, that's one of Ethan's guns above your door. Right. And now we're friends. Yeah. So, but New York,
look at what was that guy? My friend, like, she would just go like rummaging around the East Village, like looking for street art all the time.
Yeah, there's there's a bunch of people who collect that stuff. Yeah. Like we even got Nara. Yeah, who's like the largest, the highest selling Japanese painter, number 2 highest selling Japanese painter who's alive, right? So he was showing at a gallery, and some of our guys work in the gallery. They're like, oh, we're going to bring you to the antagonist art show. They bring him into the bar, right?
Niagara.
The owner of the bar goes like, oh shit, this guy's like a world-class famous painter. He has a big show, and he's like at all of the art fairs. So like, hey, Nara, we're going to give you as much drinks as you want all night for you and your friends for free.
Yeah.
Nice.
Barback, go get some markers. You can draw anywhere you want on the wall.
Oh, of course.
So Nara's like, awesome. And I'm in New York. I'm at an antagonist art show. I'm with he's with Ted, like one of the antagonists.
Meanwhile, the next day, like the sheetrock is coming off the walls.
Well,
right?
so
No, it's not. It's still there, right? It's still there.
It's on the walls because they're load-bearing walls. So they're trying to figure out how to take it off. It's valued at $200,000 because...
Did they put like a plastic...
There's plastic coverings over it because people then were tagging it. Mm-hmm. He wrote on a door. That door gone the next day because they were like, this is about... Like the owner was like, take that door off, put it in my house because that's a ton of money. He wrote specific Niagara things and Ramones things because he knew all the Ramones guys would hang out there.
It's a very personalized art. You
So,
know that, right? Yeah.
But on his way home, he's drunk. He walks up First Avenue. He draws at First Flight music store, which I identified. I told them, don't paint over this. They paint over it. I'm like, again, that's probably $10,000. New York City subway, he goes in, takes a marker, writes on a brick. 10,000 if they just took that brick out, right? Police catch him, bust him, throw him in jail.
That's right.
Makes the national news in Japan.
No, in here too. I read about it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was in the New York Daily News.
Yeah.
But in Japan, it was national news. And he was considered, half the city was like, the young people were like, that's awesome. The older population was, this is a national disgrace, right? He almost misses his art opening, which I'm also working at that gallery too. So it's like me and Ted are going to get fired, right? Almost misses the opening, makes it in time. Everyone's like, Nara, how are you okay? And he's like, it was so amazing because he grew up watching all these crime movies in New York City, and he experienced a New York City police jail. Right. He went to the Tombs, hang out with criminals. He thought it was the most amazing thing, But for us, we were like, oh, thank God you made the opening.
Made your opening.
But we had lots of stories like that through the antagonist movement through the years.
Wow. Well, let's get back to you. Okay, this is what it's about you, the show, right?
Well, that's an antagonist story, but the New York City, though, because
New York City.
You were saying it's a Muse.
You've been in New York for how many years now?
Since 88.
88. Okay, yeah. So even though you're from Boston and then DC.
Washington D.C. I went to Boston for a year, back to D.C. and then New York.
But New York is a big part of what you do. I mean.
People say to me like, oh, you should move to LA because of the film stuff, or other cities like Berlin, even Providence. People were like, you should move here with your group because the city will basically give you a building. But I was like, there's no other city than New York where I have the ability to do what I do creatively, have editors, art, publish my own books, publish a fanzine, do films.
To all of those people.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
here's New York.
Amazing.
It's like you have the most talented people in the world that come here and want to do something. I'm so tapped into to those resources that it'd be very hard to move. And, for the film stuff, it's like New York and LA is the difference between studio and independent. And I'm not studio. I make independent films where I, break a sweat, bloody my knuckles, work hard to get it done. There's no chance in LA I can do that. And I just recently did a film festival with a pilot that I did I showed you that, The Great Record Hunt, which is I made a pilot about a travel show about discovering new music through your local record shop.
That's fantastic.
We're living in a digital world, but there are those who still have love for the analog. I'm on the search for undiscovered music. Records have been on the rise, crushing CDs. Making records is hard, but the creators behind it are passionate. From the big cities to the small towns. If it's new and on vinyl, we'll be there. This is a travel show about records. This is The Great Record Hunt.
But that's not what this podcast is about. What's the next question?
So tell us about your nonprofit, Citizen 40 Hours.
Right. So Antagonist Art Movement, laboratory for helping to develop artists, closed that in 2017, lost the gallery space. We then opened up our nonprofit, a 501c, Citizens for the Arts. There's a Facebook page. There's a website for it. Make your donations. But that one is the same thing where it's trying to help develop a community of artists, specifically in New York City, but also globally. And we really do that through providing instruction and classes for disadvantaged youth. So we've done it in in Lisbon, Sydney, Australia, Ecuador, and we take these kids from hard backgrounds and we teach them art practices that they can replicate for little or no cost. So we go to the materials for the arts, we get a bunch of paints and all of that, bring it to a place, donate it to all the kids so they have a starter pack. I teach the fanzine workshop, so I teach kids how to create fanzines from scratch to finish. We have a German artist who teaches, the pinhole cameras, so how to make
that's fantastic.
Cardboard into a camera. Shannon is one of our officers, does printmaking. So we always try to say what the location is. We give them a collection of artists to pick from, and then we bring the artist, we do the practice, we teach the kids and give them the knowledge and how to replicate it themselves.
I mean, Ethan, let me ask you, have you ever approached the guys down on Norfolk Street who have that old school and they have a lot of our artist spaces in there?
No, I mean, I do.
I knew many friends who had studios and art spaces in there, for years. And they always worked with artist budgets and.
No, I mean, you say in the old, it's like the something.
It's like an old.
No, I know it's like a huge. It's
Norfolk
like No, I know the place. Yeah. I can't remember the name. It's like the Compelli something center or something. It's like with a C. But they have the ABC No Rio archives are in there, so I'm always going there to bring the zines and seeing the studios thing there. But
talk about ABC No Rio. I think my brother's band, his first show was at ABC No Rio, and they were always so positive about letting kids having shows there all the time.
They still have the library and the print stuff still goes on for ABC No Rio. They have a building.
Their space as well. Or?
Well, they have this thing to renovate and build an entire new building, like a modern state of the art ABC No Rio with the library and everything in it. The problem is they have to get permission from some of the buildings that they have to get, they would need to access the property to build the thing up, not to build on the property, but to construct it.
Right.
And Steve, the guy who's the whole charge of ABC No Rio, just had a lung transplant. So it's like with this whole COVID thing, he's probably has to stay very low thing, but he's still progressing. And go to abcrio.org or whatever, and they take donations. They're trying to build a whole amazing community arts center down there.
Yeah.
But so that building is where I go in to give him the updated zines to keep their zine library up to date.
And when did he start that? Early 80s or probably, I would think, right?
Yeah, I guess. I've been filming in that location since the 80s. So I would say late 80s, early 90s. But yeah.
So what's next for you?
One last thing for Citizens for the Arts.
Okay, yeah, please go on.
Is that the whole concept is to teach kids how to replicate something and make micro economies. Teach somebody something how to make art. You can sell art in all different places of the world. Sorry, go on.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
What was the next question?
Yeah, so what's next for you? What are you working on?
I'm working on 2 documentaries. I have a script I just finished. I have a 3rd book that I would love to find a publisher for. I'm doing an art project called, I Love You, New York, but You're Bringing Me Down, based on the LCD sound system thing.
Stealing James's lyrics there.
So I made an entire city out of recycled materials. So only materials that came through my house, boxes, bottles of water bottles, and created an entire 3D sculpture of a city. It's massive. I've run out of space in my apartment and actually had filled up an entire room at my mother's house on the west side. So, but when is that going to happen? I don't know. It's supposed to happen at Hal Happening, but who knows? I don't have a date for that yet.
Well.
Well, looking forward to
but
that.
You can find me on Instagram and Facebook. Please add me and see my artwork.
Don't point at the camera, Ethan.
Watch Man in Camo.
Manny Camo. Yeah. So it's going to be a last question. So the suit.
Right. So Truman Capote.
Said.
No. Truman Capote in his white suit, and what's his name? The other Tom Sawyer writer.
Mark Twain.
Mark Twain.
Yeah.
White suits, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of thing in literary where writers would have these all white suits that they would kind of wear as their kind of like Superman to their Clark Kent. So they would go out in public and be like, oh, this is that writer. And if they want to be incognito, they just wear their normal street clothes. And also it's like an event suit. So for me, I was like, oh, that's a great concept. Like, don't just show up at an event, your events, become a part of the event. And becoming a part of the event is dressing up for the event. So I'm not going to wear just like a normal suit. I'm going to wear a suit that represents sort of my theory and thinking. And for me, art is combat. It's war. You have to really be ready to go battle if you want to do something creatively. So I wanted a camo suit. To get the suit made, I bought all this fabric in the fabric district, camo, brought it over to Asia, and had the suits made. Now, so in Thailand, when you bring camo there, they're like, okay, we can't make this because it's a crime if you wear this out in the city. So I had to promise not to wear the camo suit because they'll arrest you because you're trying to impersonate the military. Though you see kids wearing these t-shirts that have camo prints all of them with bands and stuff. So this one comes with
with its own
antagonist movement, silencer, like gangster style.
Nice.
The first suit I got made in Korea was by this Paris something suits, which is the place where all of the politicians, like every American politician goes. He makes super good suits. And the guy was a trip. He had like totally drawn on eyebrows and like kind of like lipstick, but in a suit.
Oh, wow.
And he kept saying like, look at all these great fabrics we have. Why would you want camo? He's like, come on, I'll make you and I was like, no,
it's your signature.
I'm never going to wear that. It has to be a camo suit. And I wear it constantly. So I'm glad I did it.
Wow.
Now that's your signature. And the movie is made out,
Man in Camo. And that's the name of the film is because when I do events and galleries, you'd always hear people like, oh, who's the man in camo? Man in camo. And also like Johnny Cash, all my films are related to something punk rock. So the Man in Black, Man in Camo.
Exactly.
Dolls of Lisbon, New York Dolls, this is New York. This is Berlin, not New York. There's a famous record called This is New York, Not Boston. So every one of my films is related to some kind of punk rock title of something else.
Homage too. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Great. Thank you so much
Thank you.
Great stories.
Yep. You guys got to physically drag me out of here because I'm just going to keep talking. So next week when you tune in and there's another guest, I'll be like, hey, how you doing?
Well, we'll definitely have you back when you get that book published. That's what it's.
Yeah, that'll be never.
Don't say never. Never say never. But Ethan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Definitely.
Virtual handshake to the people out there.
Handshakes. Bye-bye.
Did that work?